Thomas here with Much Props, going to give you another how-to video. Today I'm just going to wing it. I don't have really anything intended or in mind as I start this build. I am literally just a blank slate, looking at Google searches, seeing what I think looks cool, and throwing things together. I may go historical, I may go fantasy, I don't know. The only thing I know is I'm going to build a helmet out of EVA foam. That's the game plan. So without further ado, let's mess something up. After several hours of looking at images of helmets on Google searches, surfing social media, and procrastinating this week's build, I finally decided on a great Helm style helmet from the medieval era with that iconic flat top. That indecisiveness led to me just going for it. I quickly built this template using the foil and duct tape method on a mannequin head and ended up with this pattern. It curves a little at the top, which I didn't intentionally do, and I wasted so much time thinking of ideas, it was no turning back at this point. This will be the common theme of most of these clips, just sending it because I don't want to start over. I trace my patterns onto some 6mm foam and get ready to cut it out. My templates have a cover page that explains all these markings and colors on them. If you decide to make any of my builds, make sure to review it. Also, tag me in any social media posts online when you make it. I love seeing these patterns put to good use by others. Seeing your spin on it, your creativity, motivates me to be more creative also. Green highlighted edges are for the outward 45-degree angle cuts, and blue edges on my templates are generally 45-degree angle cuts inward. Make sure to use a sharp hobby knife or cutting utensil and be mindful of the parts of your body near and around the cutting path. You don't want any owies. Assembly of the base is pretty straightforward with only 5 pieces. I don't know what the face shield will look like just yet because I'm making this up as I go. I need to get this part built first before I can template out the next part. Contact cement all your edges and let it set up for a few minutes. Once it's no longer wet to the touch, tack the parts together using the registration marks as your guide. Those are the U-shaped marks on the edges. Initially, I thought about adding holes to the front of this face shield, so that's why you see them on the pattern. I figured I might as well leave them on there just in case somebody wants to build this and do what I initially had planned. I spent a good chunk of time lining them up only to not use them. I marked how it would be positioned onto the helmet base by marking a red dotted line with an area mapping out those attachment points. I would recommend adding the lines to help you with alignment, and it also limits the amount of glue that you'll need to use. The face shield was a bit flimsy and I didn't like how far it kicked off of my face, so I'm going to make a slight modification to this part to taper it back in towards my chin. I thought it would be helpful to show you this mod process to see how easy it is to tweak parts on patterns to fit you better. Basically, I cut a wedge and glue it back together. I went ahead and modified the template to match this adjustment. I also didn't like how flimsy it was with just one sheet going across, so I patterned out a top to the face shield to make it more rigid. With the base done, I started thinking about details, and it was at this point I started to drift from my initial idea of a historical base helmet. I looked at similar shaped items and kept coming back to images of like helmets from Skyrim, Sauron's helmet from the Lord of the Rings, and I really liked that spiky darted stuff coming off the top of some of them, so thinking that this would fix my dislike for the shape, I templated out a front spike and put it together. Then that led to one on each side and then one for the back, which snowballed into smaller ones in between each of them. Some of the spikes ended up curving inwards, which also wasn't an intentional thing, and I didn't really like how it looked, but I'm not gonna redo them. If I redid the helmet, the top would get flattened and those spikes would stick straight up. Continuing with adding more details, I wanted the edge of my face shield and the back to flare out more, so I cut a wedge out of some 10mm EVA foam and glued it to the bottom of those parts. Then after staring at it, I was like, let's do it again. So I cut a smaller strip of 6mm foam and glued it just above that one. not a fan of the transitions. I know I feel like I'm complaining a lot, but because I'm just making it up as I go, there's a lot of things that could have been worked out had I just drawn out some plans. There's two methods that I can use to fix this. Either I can carve in or burn in some details, or I can add materials to the top of this. So I'm going to use some of this clay foam that I've had laying around the studio for several years. It was a weird consistency, a bit stickier and thinner than I'm normally used to this stuff being. Fingers crossed I don't mess it up. My self-appointed Friday deadline is getting closer and closer. I don't got time. I smeared it on into the cracks and surfaces to help give the helmet a more organic look. The water helps the foam to adhere to the base helmet, and it also smooths over any fingerprints that I may want to get rid of. I let the foam set up for about an hour or two and then began carving details into the soft foam with these clay sculpting tools. I used a bunch of various tools, from the wire brush tips to the wood sticks to even a sponge and some of that foil that you see to the left up there. All of these things are great for making textures onto foam. Time for 2 coats of Plasti Dip, and yes, I used red. You'll see why in a sec. I followed the Plasti Dip up with a gradient of spray paint from red to yellow. My idea for this paint job was to make it look like cracked lava flow. The idea was maybe the Earth created this organic helmet out of a volcanic eruption and I just stumbled upon it. I don't really know. I thought it was something that was way different than a normal paint job that I would do, and I wanted to try it. The general process was to paint on these random splotches of black, leaving my spray painted gradient showing just in the cracks. I got to this point and thought it was looking more like a giraffe or a cheetah or some other kind of animal print than the lava flow. I probably could have made the crack reveal smaller and the black splotches more sporadic in size to fix this, but instead I decided to just highlight the middle points and the gaps. While I do like the pattern and the color I got, I don't like it on this helmet. It also makes you lose all of that awesome texture that I got from the clay foam. So after 6 hours of this paint job, I contemplating setting this whole build on fire. late Thursday night, I decided to paint it black and give it a metal treatment instead. It's 10 o'clock the night before this video releases, and I am still not finished. I still have to film intros, outros, start editing photos and video to post for Friday. With a little gold rub and buff and a crappy chip brush, I spend less than 5 minutes and make it look 10 times better than the flaming cheetah print that I had before. I still am not happy with how it looks, but I can at least finish this video off and share my frustration. I just wanted to share with you that the builds I do don't always turn out the way I plan them, and they aren't always the best. I am by no means an expert, and by all means making a lot of this stuff up as I go. Failure is a part of the process, and you can definitely learn resilience from being a maker. I'm going to step back from this build for now, but eventually revamp this pattern to fix all the things that I have wrong with it.
And we are finished. Here is the end result. Overall, it's okay. I wasn't extremely happy with it. Now, keep in mind, I went in with no plans, so that probably has a good bit to do with it. But it seemed like every decision I made, when I finally put it to practice, I wasn't pleased with the shape or the color or the whatever. And it just kind of kept building and building on it. So I would consider this a failed build, even though it is complete in a way. But yeah, I may have to revisit this and fix the parts on it that I don't like. But it is what it is. It was a learning experience, and I know that pretend lava looks really weird on an odd-shaped helmet. Maybe you'll try and make one of these yourselves and impress your friends with your ability to, I don't know, just make stuff. Just for funsies. Yeah. Maybe you'll get some.
Yay!
And inevitably, they're going to ask you, how'd you make that? Give them one of these. Tell them, much props. It's late from a repaint, and I got to go to school tomorrow, so. Peace out.
If you enjoy what I do here on YouTube and want to see more builds like this one, please consider joining these awesome people listed here with me over on my Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together.